A 14-year-old black teen stands in a packed courtroom, staring down the judge. His words stop everyone cold. "You're my mom. What happens next will break your heart and leave you stunned. This is their story." Judge Eleanor Kane, a stern woman in her early 50s, commanded the room from her bench. Known for her iron grip on juvenile cases, she flipped through Marcus's file with a blank stare, her glasses glinting under the fluorescent lights. The bailiff's voice cut through the air. "All rise." The crowd stood, the weight of the moment pressing down. Eleanor's sharp voice followed. "Be seated, let's get started." Marcus gripped the table, his knuckles pale. His overworked public defender, barely keeping up, mumbled something in his ear. "How do you plead?" Eleanor asked, her tone clipped. Marcus's voice shook but held firm. "Not guilty." She nodded, jotting a note. "Prosecution, go ahead." The prosecutor, a slip guy in a cheap suit, launched into his spiel. Marcus was caught after dark in a gated community, spooked a homeowner, and gave the cops attitude. Marcus barely listened, his eyes darting around the room until they locked on Eleanor. His breath hitched. Something about her face, her eyes, maybe, stirred a memory he couldn't place. Eleanor caught his stare. "Something to say, young man?" she snapped, irritation creeping into her voice. Marcus froze, his heart pounding. The room went dead quiet. He opened his mouth, then clamped it shut. "Speak, or we move on," she said, leaning forward. "I know you," Marcus blurted, his voice cracking. Whispers erupted in the crowd. Eleanor's eyebrow shot up. "What?" she said, her tone icy. Marcus swallowed hard, tears pricking his eyes. "You're my mom." The courtroom exploded in gasps. A woman in the back muttered, "Did he just?" Eleanor's pen froze mid-air, her face a mask of shock. For the first time in years, she was speechless. "Say that again," she demanded, her voice barely steady. Marcus's tears spilled over. "You're my mom," he repeated, raw pain in every word. The prosecutor fumbled his papers, stunned. The public defender gaped. Eleanor's hand shook as she set her pen down, her pulse hammering. "That's impossible," she stammered. But her eyes betrayed her doubt, fear, and something deeper flickered there. The crowd leaned in, hungry for more. Marcus's voice cut through the chaos. "You gave me up when I was a baby. My foster mom told me everything." Eleanor's breath caught. The room felt like it was closing in, the murmurs growing louder. She glanced at the bailiff, then the lawyer, both as lost as she was. "I need a moment," she choked out, standing so fast her chair screeched. "Recess! Now!" She bolted for her chambers, her heels clicking on the hardwood. Marcus slumped in his seat, tears streaming down his face, staring at the spot where she'd stood. The courtroom buzzed like a kicked hive, but for Marcus it was just noise. The woman he'd dreamed of finding his whole life had just walked away. In her chambers, Eleanor leaned against the door, her breath ragged. Memories she'd buried for decades clawed their way up. Her at 19, pregnant, terrified, her parents' voices drilling into her, "Give him up, you're not ready." She'd signed the papers, sobbing, convinced it was best for her baby. Now, that baby was here, in her courtroom, tearing her world apart. She slid to the floor, clutching her robe, Marcus's words echoing. "You're my mom." Back in the courtroom, Marcus wiped his eyes, ignoring the stares. His lawyer whispered, "You okay?" But Marcus just shook his head. He didn't care about the trespassing charge anymore. All he wanted was answers. Why had she left him? Did she ever think about him? The crowd's whispers grew louder. Reporters scribbled, sensing a viral story. But for Marcus, it was personal. He'd waited 14 years for this moment, and he wasn't backing down. Eleanor forced herself to stand, splashing water on her face from a sink in the corner. She had to go back out there, had to face him. But how? She was a judge, not a mother. She'd built her life on control, on distance. Yet Marcus's face, those eyes, were unraveling her. She straightened her robe, took a shaky breath, and opened the door. The courtroom hushed as she returned to the bench. Marcus looked up, his gaze piercing. Eleanor cleared her throat. "Court is back in session," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. But before she could continue, Marcus stood, his small frame trembling. I'm not lying, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You can't pretend I'm not here. Eleanor's heart stopped. The truth was out, and there was no hiding anymore. Eleanor Kane sat alone in her chambers, the weight of Marcus's words crushing her. You're my mom. Her hands shook as she gripped the edge of her desk, her polished exterior cracking like thin ice. The past she'd buried was clawing its way out, her at 19, scared, alone, signing away her newborn son because her parents swore it was the right thing. She'd convinced herself he'd be better off, adopted by a perfect family, living a life she could never give him. But Marcus's tear-streaked face told a different story. Her phone buzzed on the desk, snapping her out of the spiral. It was her clerk. Judge, they're waiting. Eleanor forced herself to stand, smoothing her robe-like armor. She couldn't fall apart, not here, not now. She was Judge Kane, not some broken teenager. But as she stepped back into the courtroom, the sea of eyes hit her like a spotlight. Marcus sat at the defendant's table, his jaw tight, staring straight at her. The air crackled with anticipation. Court is back in session, Eleanor said, her voice steady but hollow. She glanced at the prosecutor, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Continue, she ordered. The prosecutor cleared his throat, fumbling. Your Honor, given recent events, we should address the defendant's claim. No, Eleanor cut him off, sharper than she meant. We're here for the trespassing charge. Stick to it. She couldn't let this become a circus. But Marcus wasn't having it. He shot to his feet, his voice raw. You don't get to ignore me. I know it's you. The crowd gasped, phone sneaking out to record. Eleanor's heart pounded, her composure slipping. Sit down, she said, but her voice wavered. Marcus shook his head, tears spilling. You left me. My foster mom had a picture of you. She said you were young, scared, but you chose to give me up. Why didn't you ever look for me? The room went dead silent. Eleanor's throat tightened, her mind racing. She wanted to deny it, to shut this down, but Marcus's eyes, those same eyes she'd seen in that hospital room 14 years ago, held her captive. This isn't the place, she managed, her voice barely audible. Marcus's lawyer, a frazzled guy named Tom, stood up. Your Honor, my client's statement changes everything. We need to address this. Eleanor's gaze flicked to the crowd, their whispers growing louder, reporters scribbling like vultures. She was trapped, her carefully built life crumbling in real time. Before she could respond, the courtroom doors swung open. A woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a weary stride, stepped inside. Marcus's face lit up, a mix of relief and pain. Miss Lena, he called, his voice breaking. The crowd turned, murmuring. Eleanor froze, her stomach dropping. Lena Carter, the social worker who'd handled her son's adoption all those years ago, the one who'd promised her he'd be okay. Lena's eyes met Eleanor's, heavy with recognition. Your Honor, she said softly, we need to talk. Eleanor's world tilted. Marcus's claim wasn't just a desperate plea, it was real, and Lena was proof. The whispers in the room grew deafening, but Eleanor barely heard them. She looked at Marcus, his hope and hurt laid bare, and felt something inside her break. I need another recess, she said, her voice cracking. She banged the gavel and fled to her chambers, the slam of the door echoing behind her. Marcus sank into his chair, staring at the empty bench. Lena moved to his side, resting a hand on his shoulder. You're doing good, Marcus, she whispered. He shook his head, tears falling. Why won't she just talk to me? In her chambers, Eleanor paced, her breath uneven. She yanked open a drawer, pulling out a faded photo she hadn't touched in years. A newborn swaddled in blue, his tiny face peaceful. Her son. She'd kept it hidden, a secret even from herself. Now Marcus was here, demanding answers she wasn't sure she could give. A knock at the door made her jump. Judge Kane? It was Lena, her voice calm but firm. We can't keep running from this. Eleanor shoved the photo back in the drawer, wiping her eyes. Come in, she said, forcing her voice steady. Lena stepped inside, closing the door. That boy out there, she said, he's been through hell. Foster homes, broken promises, he deserves the truth. Eleanor's jaw tightened. I know, she snapped, then softened. I don't know how to face him. Lena's gaze was steady. You start by showing up. Eleanor nodded, her throat burning. She didn't have a choice anymore. Marcus wasn't just a case. He was her son. And he was waiting. The courtroom was a pressure cooker, buzzing with whispers as Eleanor Kane vanished into her chambers. Marcus sat at the defendant's table, his heart pounding, eyes fixed on the empty judge's bench. He'd just called out Judge Kane, his birth mother, in front of everyone, and she'd bolted. Again. Lena, his social worker, stood by his side, her hand steady on his shoulder, but it wasn't enough to quiet the storm in his chest. He wanted answers, not silence. In the back row, Sarah Coleman, a 28-year-old reporter for the Willow Creek Gazette, scribbled furiously in her notebook. She'd come to cover a routine juvenile case, but Marcus's bombshell, "You're my mom," had her hooked. This wasn't just news, it was a story that could change lives. Sarah's gut told her there was more to dig up, and she wasn't about to sit on her hands. While the courtroom waited for Eleanor to return, Sarah slipped out, her phone already buzzing with texts to old contacts in the social services network. She ducked into a quiet hallway, dialing a former source, a clerk who owed her a favor. "Hey, I need you to check something. Fast," Sarah said, her voice low. "Adoption records. Willow Creek about 14 years ago. Mother named Eleanor Kane, kid would have been born around 99. The clerk hesitated but caved under Sarah's urgency. "Give me 10 minutes. Back in the courtroom, the tension hadn't eased. Marcus fidgeted, his sneakers tapping the floor. Lena leaned in. "She's scared, Marcus. Give her time." He shook his head, jaw tight. "I've given her 14 years. The crowd murmured, some sneaking glances at their phones, already tweeting about the drama. Marcus's lawyer Tom shuffled papers clearly out of his depth. Everyone was waiting for Eleanor, but the clock kept ticking. Sarah's phone pinged in the hallway. Her contact had come through, a scanned document from an old adoption file. Her eyes scanned the screen. Mother, Eleanor Kane, age 19. Child, male, born March 12, 1999. Surrendered for adoption, April 1999. The dates lined up with Marcus's age. Sarah's pulse raced. This was it, proof Eleanor couldn't dodge. But she needed confirmation. As she paced, she spotted Lena Carter stepping out of the courtroom, her face lined with worry. "Miss Carter," Sarah called, jogging over. Lena turned, wary. "I'm Sarah Coleman? Gazette? I've got something you need to see." She showed Lena the document on her phone, and his eyes widened, her hand covering her mouth. "Where did you get this?" she asked, voice shaking. "Doesn't matter," Sarah said. "Is it true? Was Eleanor Kane Marcus's mother?" Lena hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. I handled the adoption. She was just a kid herself." Sarah didn't waste a second. She marched back into the courtroom, just as Eleanor re-emerged, her face pale but composed. The crowd hushed. Eleanor sat, avoiding Marcus's gaze. "Court is back in session," she said, her voice tight. Before she could continue, Sarah stood, holding up her phone. "Your Honor, I have evidence that needs to be addressed." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "This isn't a press conference, Ms. Coleman," Sarah cut in, unfazed. "I have a document confirming you surrendered a child for adoption in 1999. The dates match Marcus's birth. You can't ignore this." Gasps rippled through the room. Marcus's head snapped up, his eyes wide. Eleanor froze, her hands gripping the bench. "That's not relevant," she stammered, but her voice cracked. Marcus stood, his voice shaking but fierce. "It is relevant. You're my mom, and you owe me the truth. Why'd you leave me?" The crowd leaned in, phones out, recording every word. Sarah stepped forward, handing a printed copy of the document to the bailiff, who passed it to Eleanor. She stared at it, her hands trembling. The truth was undeniable now, laid bare for everyone to see. Eleanor's eyes met Marcus's, and for a moment the courtroom faded away. His pain, his anger. It was all she could see. She started, then stopped, her voice breaking. "I can't do this here." She took a shaky breath. "Marcus, let's talk. Just us." Marcus blinked, caught off guard, but nodded slowly, tears brimming. Eleanor turned to the bailiff. "Clear the room. We're going to the conference room." As Marcus and Eleanor walked toward the side door, the crowd erupted in whispers. Sarah and Lena stayed behind, exchanging a glance. Sarah's heart raced. She'd blown the story wide open, but this wasn't about headlines anymore. Lena's eyes were soft, hopeful. "You did good," she said quietly. Sarah nodded, her gaze fixed on the closing door. Whatever happened next was up to Marcus and Eleanor. The conference room felt like a pressure chamber, its plain walls and single table amplifying the tension between Marcus and Eleanor. The door clicked shut, sealing them in with 14 years of unspoken pain. Marcus sat, his hands fidgeting, eyes locked on the table. Eleanor stood by the door, gripping the handle like it was her lifeline. Her judicial robe felt suffocating, a reminder of the authority she no longer held in this moment. "Sit down," Marcus said, his voice quiet but firm. It was a gut punch, a 14-year-old calling the shots. Eleanor nodded, easing into the chair across from him, her hands twisted together, betraying her nerves. Silence stretched, heavy with everything they hadn't said. Marcus broke it first, his voice trembling. "Why'd you give me up?" Eleanor's breath caught. She looked at him, really low. His brown eyes, full of hurt, were the same ones she'd glimpsed in that hospital room, the baby she'd held for just a moment before letting go. "I was 19, she started, her voice shaky. "Scared. Broke. My parents said I wasn't ready to be a mom. They pushed me to sign the papers, said you'd have a better life." She swallowed hard. "I believed them." Marcus's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing. "Better? You think bouncing between foster homes was better? Wondering why nobody wanted me?" His voice cracked, raw with anger. Eleanor flinched, tears welling. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I thought you'd be adopted, have a family, a home. I never checked. I was too afraid." "Afraid?" Marcus shot back, leaning forward. "You were afraid? I was the one left alone, waiting for someone who never came." Eleanor's tears spilled over. She wiped them away, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I thought I was doing the right thing. I was wrong. I failed you." Marcus stared, his anger softening into something heavier, exhaustion maybe. He'd spent years imagining this moment, rehearsing what he'd say to the mother who abandoned him. But now, seeing her broken, sobbing across from him, his rage felt less certain. "Do you even care now?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Or am I just some ghost you want to forget?" Eleanor's head snapped up, her eyes fierce despite the tears. "You were never a ghost. I've thought about you every day, every single day. I just didn't know how to fix what I broke." Her voice cracked, but she held his gaze. "You're not a mistake, Marcus. You never were." The words hung in the air, heavy but real. Marcus's shoulders slumped, his hands unclenching. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said softly. "I'm not asking you to," Eleanor replied, her voice steadying. "But if you'll let me, I want to be here now, for you, if that's what you want." Marcus stared at her outstretched hand on the table, hesitant. Slowly he reached out, his fingers brushing hers. "I don't know if it's enough," he said. Eleanor nodded, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "It's a start." Outside, the courtroom had cleared, leaving only Lena and Sarah by the bench. Lena's eyes were soft, watching the closed conference room door. Sarah paced, her reporter's adrenaline still buzzing. "Think they'll be okay?" she asked. Lena sighed, a small smile tugging at her lips. "They're talking. That's more than they had an hour ago." Back in the room, Marcus and Eleanor sat in silence. But it wasn't as heavy now. Something had shifted, a crack in the wall between them. Eleanor took a shaky breath. "What happens now?" she asked, almost to herself. Marcus shrugged, his voice quiet. "I don't know, but I want to find out." They stood, Marcus a step ahead as they walked to the door. Eleanor paused, glancing at him. "I'm not going anywhere this time," she said. Marcus didn't respond, but his nod was enough. As they stepped back into the courtroom, Lena and Sarah looked up, their faces a mix of relief and hope. The path ahead was messy, but for the first time, Marcus felt like he wasn't walking it alone. The conference room door clicked shut behind Marcus and Eleanor, but the weight of their conversation lingered. Marcus's heart was a tangle of anger, hope, and something he couldn't name. Eleanor's tear-streaked face stayed with him. Her regret, her promise to stay. He wanted to believe her, but 14 years of letdowns made trust a hard sell. In the courtroom, Lena and Sarah waited, the air thick with anticipation. Lena's calm presence grounded the moment, while Sarah tapped her foot, itching to know what went down. "He's tough," Lena said softly, glancing at the door. "But he's been hurt too much." Sarah nodded, her reporter's edge softening. "And her? Think she'll step up?" Lena sighed. "She's got to, for both their sakes." Inside her chambers, Eleanor sat at her desk, hands trembling as she pulled out the faded photo again. Baby Marcus, wrapped in a blue blanket. She traced his tiny face, tears falling. She'd spent years convincing herself she'd done right by him, but his words, "You didn't even try," cut deep. She wasn't just a judge anymore, she was a mother who'd left her son to fend for himself. The thought made her chest ache. A knock broke her spiral. "Judge Kane?" It was Lena, her voice gentle but firm. Eleanor wiped her eyes, shoving the photo back in the drawer. "Come in." Lena stepped inside, her gaze steady. "Marcus needs you to show up, Eleanor. Not as a judge, but as his mom." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "I don't know how," she admitted, voice raw. Lena's smile was small, but warm. "You start by trying. He's waiting." Back in the courtroom, Marcus sat, staring at his scuffed sneakers. Lena returned, crouching beside him. "She's hurting too," she said, "but she wants to make this right." Marcus's lip quivered. "What if she bails again?" Lena squeezed his shoulder. "Then you've got me. But I don't think she will." Eleanor emerged, her face composed but eyes red. She walked to the bench, her gaze settling on Marcus. "This court deals with law," she said, her voice steadying. "But today, it's about something bigger." She paused, her throat tight. "Marcus, I owe you more than answers. I owe you a chance. Can we talk more outside this place?" The room buzzed, but Marcus barely noticed. His eyes locked on hers, searching for a lie. He saw none. Slowly, he nodded. "Yeah, okay." Eleanor exhaled, relief flickering across her face. "We'll meet somewhere you choose," she said. "This isn't about the case anymore." She turned to the bailiff. "Dismiss the charges. This ends here." The crowd murmured, stunned, but Eleanor's focus stayed on Marcus. As they left the courtroom, Lena and Sarah trailing behind, Marcus felt lighter, like a knot in his chest had loosened. Outside, the sun hit his face, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor showed up. Their first meeting was at a Willow Creek park, Marcus's pick. It was awkward, stilted small talk, long silences. But Eleanor kept coming back, meeting him at the library, the diner, wherever he felt safe. She listened as he spilled stories of foster homes, lost friends, and dreams of being a mechanic. Marcus watched her closely, waiting for her to flake. But she didn't. One day, at the community center, Eleanor shared her own story, her teenage years, the pressure from her parents, the guilt that never left. Marcus leaned forward, hanging on her words. "You ever wish you kept me?" he asked, voice low. Eleanor's eyes glistened. "Every day," she said. "But I can't undo it. I can only be here now." Marcus nodded, something softening in his chest. "I'm still pissed," he admitted. "That's fair," she said. "Oh, I've got a lot to make up for." Their bond grew in small moments. Eleanor showed up to watch Marcus shoot hoops, cheering when he nailed a shot. He grinned, embarrassed but secretly proud. She worked with Lena to find therapy programs, even joined a community event to understand his world better. Some days were rough. Old wounds flared, doubts crept in, but Eleanor kept her promise and Marcus started to let her in. As they walked out of the center one evening, Marcus glanced at her. "This doesn't fix everything," he said. Eleanor nodded, her hand brushing his shoulder. "I know, but we're trying, right?" Marcus gave a small smile. "Yeah, we're trying." Marcus and Eleanor stepped out of the community center, the evening air cool against their skin. The past few weeks had been a roller coaster. Awkward talks, raw confessions, and small steps toward something neither could fully define. Marcus still carried the weight of 14 years without her, but Eleanor's steady presence was starting to chip away at his walls. For Eleanor, every moment with Marcus was a chance to rewrite the past she'd run from. Their meetings had become a routine. Parks, diners, the rec center. Marcus opened up about his life. The foster homes that never felt like home, the teachers who saw his potential, his dream of fixing cars. Eleanor soaked it in, her heart aching for the years she'd missed. She shared her own story too, her strict parents, her climb to judge, the guilt that haunted her. One afternoon, as they sat on a park bench, Marcus asked, "You ever think about me before I showed up in court?" Eleanor's voice was soft but sure. "All the time. I just didn't know how to find you, or if you'd want me to." Marcus nodded, staring at the ground. "I did." The trust grew slowly. Eleanor surprised Marcus at a rec center basketball game, clapping when he sank a three-pointer. He rolled his eyes, but couldn't hide his grin. He worked with Lena to connect Marcus with a mentorship program for mechanics, even attended a community BBQ to meet his world. There were hiccups. Marcus snapped when old hurts resurfaced, and Eleanor doubted she'd ever be enough, but they kept showing up. Months later, a small crowd gathered in a Willow Creek courthouse room, not for a trial, but a celebration. Marcus stood beside Eleanor, his usual hoodie swapped for a crisp shirt. Lena, Sarah, and a few rec center friends watched, smiling. A new judge, a kind-faced woman, spoke warmly. "Today, we mark a new chapter. Eleanor Kane has petitioned for legal guardianship of Marcus Carter, and both have agreed to move forward." The room erupted in applause. Marcus glanced at Eleanor, his expression soft but guarded. She rested a hand on his shoulder, her eyes shining. "We're not perfect," she said quietly, "but we're in this together." Marcus's lips twitched into a smile. "Yeah, together." They stepped outside, hand in hand, the courthouse looming behind them. The past wasn't gone. Marcus still wrestled with anger, and Eleanor carried her regrets. But it didn't define them anymore. Instead, it was a foundation, rough but solid, for whatever came next. Marcus looked at Eleanor, his voice steady. "I think we're gonna be all right." Eleanor squeezed his hand, tears brimming. "I know we are." The story of Marcus and Eleanor teaches us that it's never too late to face our past and rebuild broken connections. Their journey shows the power of honesty, courage, and showing up even when it's messy. In our own lives, we can apply this by reaching out to someone we've lost touch with, owning our mistakes, or giving second chances. Because healing starts with a single step. What's a relationship you'd want to mend, or a truth you need to face? Drop it in the comments and let's talk about it. Thanks for watching, and if this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. See you in the next one.